Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your professor today as I look at the 1995 Donruss Red Zone game. Now this set's always been kind of interesting as a collector because this is the inaugural year that Donruss made football cards. But it was a game. These aren't the typical cards that you usually get. Basically, a normal card has a player on the front, usually statistics on the back. It has a card number usually, and it's about the player. But in this case, there are no numbers. There's not even a back. It's a player card back. So this is more like playing cards than it is trading cards. And when I was trying to figure out how to talk about these cards for a video, I realized there really wasn't much to say. Basically, they're there, there's a picture on the front, there's a name, there's a team, and that's about it. They don't even get really into position. It's very vague. So I realized that really with this particular set, it was really kind of best to talk about the game as opposed to the set itself. And that got me curious because I'd never explored the game. I'd never cared about the game. And now I did actually get kind of interested. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to explain the game in a very basic level so that if you have a bunch of cards and you're curious about what the game's like, you can go ahead and play it. I'm not going to get complex at all. It's going to be the basics in order to just play at a very basic level, and the game doesn't really need much. Basically, if you have about 80 cards for each player, then you've got pretty much everything that you need. The only other thing you're going to need really is the play chart, and you can probably find that online. So, but if you are curious about really playing this with another person and you want to make sure that you have enough to do it, the starter decks, the way that the cards game, they give you everything that you need. So I'll get into that in a second, but I first off want to talk about how this came about. Donruss started off as a baseball card set, and then in the early 90s it started doing hockey, and then by 1995 they decided it was about time to get into football. But instead of jumping right into football, they hit this game. Now the game came about because Magic the Gathering had become an enormous success by this time, and it was inevitable that somebody would pick this up for various sports. Now, this isn't the first time that anybody had done card games for sports. Topps had done a few in the past. There were a few iterations, but this was the first deeply complex game that had been created. The first time they tried to build a full game, sequence by sequence, play by play. And they started off with baseball, and the baseball game is called Top of the Order. I'm not going to get into that, but it was the game that came just before this, and then with football, Donruss created Red Zone. Now the next year, starting with 1996, they would do normal sets, but for 95, this was all that we got. And the game is built in terms of every card has a whole bunch of information that applies to different aspects of the game. Specifically, there are 5 pieces of information on every single card. Obviously, in the middle of the card, you have the player and the position. But the more important elements are on the top, you have the plays. On the top left, you have the offensive play. On the top right, you have the defensive play. Sometimes you'll have a specialty play, which is a black bar which goes the whole length, and it has a long written out explanation of what in particular that particular play or effect will have. Then on the sides, you have the skill checks, and the skills for each player. This is where choosing the player actually comes into play. You don't use this too often, but when you do, these are the strengths and weaknesses that each player has. And you'll notice there's a color coding, red, yellow, and green, a stoplight. And this plays into it. This is how we understand the effects of each play that we particularly run. Then at the bottom left-hand corner, you have the results of the play. And this comes in 4 different categories. Offensive run, offensive pass, defensive run, defensive pass. And you'll notice that offensive run and offensive pass are OR and OP. And then the defense is run defense and pass defense. They flipped the O and the D, I think, to make sure that you understood which is which, but it becomes kind of confusing when you're looking at it because it doesn't look like a perfect grid. You'll get used to it after a while, but it is kind of annoying that they flip the letters like that. But you'll notice that you're seeing the same colors show up, the red, yellow, and green. So again, these are about the results, and so we'll see that coming up very shortly. The other part of the card is the bottom right, and this is the special teams component. You have the kick return, you have the punt return, you have a field goal, and you have a long gain. You'll see these also in effect, but all these elements are pretty self-explanatory. So the way that these cards work is we have 3 different areas where the cards show up. You have 2 decks, and then you have the actual team setup. I'll start off with the decks. The first deck is the time deck, and this is your clock, but it's also your sequence of plays. Not a chosen sequence, this is a random sequence. So every time you do a play, you draw a card off of here, and when you draw the card, it tells you the result of the play. And this is where the color really comes into play. What you look at on the time deck is you look at the bottom left-hand corner, the two different types of offensive or defensive plays, the color that goes along with it. Every once in a while you're going to see a penalty in place, and it's either a false start like penalty, 5 yards or 10 yards, replay the down so you get a new down, or it's an FADD, which you'll see later on, but that's more like an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, which is kind of like an effect after the play, but I'm not sure exactly what they had in mind with it. But you may see one or two of those pop up. Now, if you're low on cards and you just want to have one time deck to speed things up and make it a lot more simple, since both the offense and the defense is on each one of the cards, you can actually use one of these decks for both players. If you're going to do that, though, I would advise that you take out the special play cards, the ones with the black banner along the top. Pull all those out because that has the penalties. And the penalties affect whoever draws the cards. So if the offense and defense is using the same card, then you don't know who the penalty affects. And if you just want to sit down, do a simple game, move kind of quickly, you don't want a lot of complexity, pull all those special play cards out, it's going to work out really well. But normally you play with two decks, and so I'm going to be doing that with two time decks. The other deck is the draw deck, and the draw deck is basically, this is a card game, and so you have a hand of cards. You have 7 cards in your hand. These are your plays. You choose those, and every time you choose one and use it, you draw a new card from the draw deck. So the time deck is its own affair. You only have a certain number of plays, usually about 40 per quarter, and those have their own life, and then you have the draw deck, which is doing kind of the same thing. Now, in terms of how long it should go, 40 cards is about right for each quarter. And once you go through the time deck, you start over, and the draw deck does the same thing. When you get to the end of the quarter, you start the draw deck over, and you go for 4 quarters. The last part of this game is the actual team. And the way that you choose the team is however you want, obviously, but ideally, since most of us are strong football fans and we have a team that we like to follow, then we would like to go with our team. Understand, even if you have the complete set of the main set, there are only 4 teams that actually have all the positions in the main deck. They did do an updated set, and those appear to add in all of the missing cards in each of these teams. But if you're looking for the Browns, Chiefs, Dolphins, or the Chargers, you're good. They have all of their players in the main set. Otherwise, you're going to have to fill in the gaps. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use Oakland and I'm going to use Denver. And while I'm going to be doing just one drive with the Denver offense and the Oakland defense, where they have all the players, both teams are missing one player on the other side. So if I were to show the other direction, the Raiders are short one running back, so I put Marcus Allen in there, for old time's sake. And the Broncos are missing one linebacker, so I put Michael Brooks in there, for old time's sake. Again, we're not going to see that, but even in terms of what I've set up, those 2 players had to be added in to make the teams work. So you're going to see it in pure form. So one way is to choose your favorite team. The other way is to just build a team with the best players that you can come up with. And this is the way they advise. They actually say that whoever loses the coin flip, because the winner chooses whether they're going to receive or kick off at the beginning, normally the other team chooses which direction they're going to go, and it doesn't matter here. So they like to say, well, just be the first player to choose in your draft. However you want to do it is fine. But again, I'm going to do it based upon teams. And now that you can see the teams, you can see how the positions work. Basically, there are 7 different positions, and there are 13 players total. You have a defensive player opposite every single offensive player, and you have every position mirrored on the right side versus the left side. So you have 2 offensive linemen, you have 2 defensive linemen, you have 2 running backs, you have 2 linebackers, you have 2 wide receivers, you have 2 defensive backs. And you also have 1 quarterback with nobody on the opposite side, because the quarterback isn't one of the playmakers, so he's not involved with the particular activities that each player has. You can swap them, you can double team them, you can do so much stuff, but the key is that these are the players that are here, and you'll notice that when we get to the plays will all have right side or left side, and that affects who each of the players are that's involved with the particular play that you're doing. Most of the time it's not going to matter, but every once in a while that will come into play. So if you do want to do this game, getting the starter decks works really well. And the starter decks come in one box, and it includes 80 cards, as you can see. It comes with a play chart, and it comes with an instruction book. And the instruction book is really handy. I'm going to give you most of what you need to know. I'm not going to get into player repositioning, which you can do. You can double up players, you can swap them, you can do lots of stuff like that. I'm not going to get into fumbles, interceptions. I'm not going to get into any of that funky stuff. I'm just going to do a very straightforward game. I'm not even going to show you specialty plays, although you will see penalties. Now, when Donruss sold these, they sold them in packs of 2. They had 2 starter decks, and the idea was you need about 80 cards to play the game, so you had enough cards for 2 different players to play the game, and you had enough instructions, and you had 2 play charts. And the reason that was important is because the play charts come with 2 sides. On the one side, you have all the actual play results. On the other side, you have the field. But you also, just in case you're curious, have an explanation of each one of the different plays. And you don't really need to understand what the plays are. You need to understand if they're run plays or pass plays, but they tell you that pretty well in the play chart. And if you're curious about what kind of play you're going to run, you can actually just look through and look at the possible results and figure out what play you think might work best for you. But if you do understand the game, then you can actually come up with some pretty complex ways of maneuvering through the game. And you're kind of going to hear that from me. So I think that's about all that I need to do in terms of setup. Pretty much everything else that you'll need to know will be coming up as I play the game. So I'm just going to do one drive. I'm going to kick off and I'm going to head down to a touchdown, and it's going to be the Denver offense versus the Oakland defense, and let's see how it goes. So to start this drive, since we're going to be using the Broncos offense and the Raiders defense, we need the Raiders to kick off to the Broncos. What we do is we first flip the card over on the time deck, and the Raiders have a 68-yard kick. Now, the kicks are starting at the 30-yard line here in this game, so that means that if you go from 30 to 50, 50 to the end zone, that's 70 yards. So a kick from the 30-yard line, a 70-yard kick hits the edge of the end zone. Thus, you're subtracting whatever yards you get from the end zone to figure out where the ball goes to. And they have a 60-yard kick, which means it ends up 2 yards shy of the end zone. So that's a pretty good kick. Then on the Broncos card, we have a return of 35 yards. So that takes it from the 2 to the 37-yard line. And that's where we get the 1st and 10 to start our drive. So on the 1st and 10, I'm going to go ahead and go with a pass play. I'm going to go with a screen. And the Oakland defense is going to go ahead and prep for a run. And so they're going with a 4-4. And when we flip over the cards, we see that the offense for offensive pass is yellow and the defensive run is yellow. And you'll notice that when one of them is yellow, both of them are yellow for either offense or defense. So basically every card has yellow on one side and either red or green on the bottom, meaning there's one red and one green. You just need to see which side each of the colors are on. They both have yellow, so we then go over to the play chart and we check and we cross-reference, and we have screen and we have 4-4 defense, and when we combine them together, we see that yellow and yellow in this box of 9 is 5 yards. So that means it's a 5-yard gain on this particular play, which takes me from the 37-yard line to the 42. So now we're at 2nd and 5, and this time I'm going to go with a run. I'm going to use an off tackle. And they're also assuming we're going to be doing a run, and so they're going to go with a stunt. Now note that when we start the play, we put our cards face down. The offense chooses their card, they put it face down. If you're going to make any substitution of the players, this is where you would do that. After you put the card down, you move your players on offense, and then the defense chooses their play based upon if you make any changes. That may affect how they do their play. They choose a play, put it down, and if they're going to make any changes to where the players are, they would do that as well. Again, we're not getting into that at this point, but that's kind of the way that it works. And so once you set your play down, and if you're going to move any personnel around, it's kind of like chess. You take your hand off the piece and you're set. So now you're ready for the play. You're not going to turn those cards over until you flip over the time deck card, and that's when you reveal your card. And we'll be seeing in a second the reason you want to flip the time deck card over before you reveal your play. So we flip the cards over, and then we look at the plays that we ran. And I ran an off tackle, they ran a stunt. Those are both run plays. So for the offense, it has a red color, and for the defense, it has a yellow color. Now, at some point, you may run into the possibility of seeing a color up or color down. All you need to know about that is that basically green is favoring the offense, red is favoring the defense. So the stoplight, green, yellow, and red, is essentially go versus stop. And the defense wants to stop you, the offense wants to go further. So anytime they're talking about color changes, moving up or down, just remember that anything that favors the offense is moving toward green, anything favoring the defense goes toward red. Again, we're not going to get into that. I don't know if you're going to run into that just playing at a most basic level, but if you do, that's what they're talking about. So at any rate, I got a red for the offense, and then the defense got a yellow. When we check the off tackle and stunt in the playlist, we find that that's a 3-yard gain. So now we've gone from the 42-yard line to the 45-yard line. Now we're at 3rd and 2. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to air it out. I'm going to go with a long bomb pass. But they're assuming I'm going to try to punch it through, so they go with another run. They're going with a 4-3. When we turn over our cards, I find that for my offensive pass, I've got a green, and for their defensive run, they've got a yellow. And by consulting the chart, I did pretty well here. I got a 17-yard gain, and that takes me across midfield to the 38-yard line. So not doing too bad, and I've got a 1st and 10. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go with a run. I'm going to go with another off tackle. And they're thinking that I'm getting a little frisky with the passing, so they're going to do a passing defense with a 4-2-5. And when we flip over our cards, my run offense has a green and their pass defense has a yellow. So that gives me a grand total of 7 yards. So that brings me all the way down to the 31-yard line. And it's 2nd and 3. So I'm going to go ahead and now I'm going to go with the pass. And I want to start punching off some yards. So I'm going to go with the long bomb. They're also assuming that I'm going to go with the pass. They go with the blitz. Now again, the defense doesn't know what the offense chose, but they called that correctly. So when we turn over our time deck cards, you'll see that I got a 5-yard penalty on the offense. Doesn't matter what the defense got. If they got a penalty, then they would offset. But I got a 5-yard penalty, and that means it's like a false start. It means that you replay the down, but I've lost 5 yards. So instead of being at the 31, I've been backed up to the 36 now. Now, because we haven't revealed our plays, I can go ahead and just leave my play in place. If I feel good about it, and for my play, it would work. Now, that does kind of nod to the defense what my play is, but I just don't see the reason of wasting a play at this point, so I'm good with this. So I'm going to stay in place. Defense stays in place, and so we now do 2nd and 8, and we flip over our next cards, and you'll see that my pass play has a red and their pass play has a green. And when we cross-reference it, we find that it's an incomplete. So I'm still at the 36-yard line, and it's now 3rd and 8. So I'm going to go ahead and get some yards. So I'm going to go with a pass play, and I'm going to go with the hook. I don't want to do anything too fancy. And they're also going to go with the pass play defense. They're going to go with the 4-2-5. As I cross-reference, I find that I'm yellow and they're green. And that shows me that I get 7 yards. So that takes me up to the 29-yard line, but it leaves me at 4th and 1. Now, with 4th and 1, you could punt, but I'm at the 29-yard line, so there's no reason to do that. But a punt works the same way as a kickoff. It's just that you basically use the line of scrimmage as your starting point. For me, that doesn't make any sense. Now, I could go the field goal. And a field goal, basically, they want you to do some math here. And I really don't know why. But what they say is you got to add 17 yards to the number of yards you've got to go for a touchdown. So I'm at the 29-yard line. But when you kick the ball, you're 7 yards back from the line of scrimmage, and the ball has to go an additional 10 yards from the line of scrimmage. So that means that a 29-yard kick would basically drop down at the 7-yard line. So they need you to take 29 and add 17, which gives you 46 yards. So I would need to get at least a 46-yard kick in order to make it. I'm not going to be going with a field goal, but that's the way that they do it. So whatever the distance, add 17 yards. And it's weird because the field goal is already a unique number, and so there's really no reason to add this number 17 afterwards. They could have done that for the result on the card, but they didn't. So just kind of keep that in mind. But I'm going to go for it. And I'm not just going to go for it. I'm going to go with a pass. I'm going to go with a quick out. Now, they're assuming that I'm going to try to punch it through, so they do a goal line stand. They're going to do a run defense. And when we flip our cards over, we find that my offensive pass is green and their defensive run is green as well. So when we check the skill check, you'll find that it says wide receiver. And that means that I have to now look at the play that I called and see which wide receiver it is. As I've noted, every single play card has a right or a left for the offense. That's the particular direction I'm going. So it's the running back on the right or the left, it's the block on the right or the left, it's the wide receiver on the right or on the left. In this case, it's the right wide receiver, who is Anthony Miller. So I've got to do a skill check of him. So that's when I go to those bands of color on the side, and when I look down on the list, since I got a green, that comes out as long. So this is a long play. And a long play is one of those special teams numbers on the bottom right-hand corner of the card. In fact, it is the bottom right-hand corner of the card. So what you do is you flip another time deck card and you look at the result of that. And so in this case, I got 17. Now the number refers to the running back long play, not the wide receiver. The receiver, you assume, already got a 10-yard pass to get the ball in the first place. So you actually, again, you have to do math. You add 10 yards onto the number. So instead of 17, it's actually a 27-yard gain for a wide receiver. And that means that I started at the 29, so this puts me at the 2-yard line. So now I'm right there at the doorstep. And it's 1st and goal. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a pass play. I'm going to do a play action pass play. And they're assuming that I'm probably going to run because they just haven't quite figured it out yet. So they're going to do a goal line stand. And when we flip our cards over, you'll notice that on the defense, they have a ±3 FADD. That stands for flip again draw deck. Basically what that means is the defense is going to have to flip over to another card and see what the result is, but they're going to have to subtract 3 yards from the result or add 3 yards for the offensive side of the result. Basically, whoever draws the FADD gets penalized the particular amount that they have picked up. So whatever the end play is, so like on the last play where I got 27 yards, if I had drawn this particular card, I would have gotten 24 yards. Had the defense drawn it, I would have gotten 30 yards. So in this case, we already know that whatever the result of the play is, the ball is going to be 3 yards closer to the end zone. It's going to be 3 yards better for Denver because Oakland is the one that ended up with this particular penalty. So when we flip the card over, you'll find that I've already got a red and their run defense has a red as well. And when we check the skill check, it says DL. Now you'll notice that it's not just DL, but it's a DL with an asterisk. Now the asterisk refers to a potential sack. When you look at the skill check on the card of the particular player, if there's an asterisk above the black band on the color bands, that asterisk refers to that this player is a sack master. If it's a defensive back, it doesn't matter. You always consider any time that says DB with an asterisk, it assumes that your defensive back got a sack. But in this case, we have Chester McLaughlin. He does, in fact, because again, this is the right side. So Chester McLaughlin is the one who gets the skill check, and he is a pass rusher. So that means that we get a sack and we get a 6-yard loss. But instead of Denver being backed up 6 yards, we're only backed up 3 yards because of the FADD. So that puts me at 2nd and goal at the 5-yard line. So for this particular one, I'm going to go ahead and do a run. I'm going to do a counter. Now again, if you don't know what these plays are, that's fine. I don't know what most of these plays are either. So I would more likely just look at the results, the general results, and kind of figure out which one I'd want to go with. So I'm going with the counter on this one. And the defense is assuming I'm going to do a run as well, so they're going to go with a stunt. So when we flip our cards over, I've got a yellow and they've got a green. And in consulting the chart, that comes out to a 7-yard gain. Now I'm at the 5-yard line, so that punches me through to the end zone. And so that means I scored a touchdown on this play. So now that I scored the touchdown, I need to kick the extra point. And the extra point basically works in about as simple of a way as you can. You flip the next card on the offense's time deck, and you look at the field goal number. And it doesn't matter what the field goal number is. It's always good unless you get a 55 asterisk. If you get that, that's a missed field goal. That's the only missed field goal, so it's very rare that you'll miss one. I could do a 2-point conversion. Basically, you're just running a play on that one. But I'm just going to go ahead and go with the extra point. So that's one drive, and that gives you a penalty, that gives you a flip again draw deck, the fad, whatever you want to call it. It gives you skill checks, different kinds of skill checks, and it gives you varying different types of plays. and it gives you a really good feel for basically how the game works. If you do a simple game, it's pretty much going to be this. It actually, once you get the hang of it, the game goes at a pretty good clip, so it's not a super time-consuming affair. And I have been kind of having some fun with this. So if you just do decide to check this out, to kind of play the game, it's probably a pretty fun thing to do if you have some spare time. And let's face it, right now, almost all of us have lots of spare time. But definitely check it out a little bit if you're curious. And if you're curious about other videos that I've done, you're not familiar with the kinds of things that I do, definitely check them out. But if you are familiar with my videos and this isn't really your thing, sorry. This was a fun thing for me to do to kind of extend the exploration of cards out a little bit. If you're curious about getting more into this and you want me to do another video, let me know by all means. If you're curious about other games like NFL Showdown for me to explore, also let me know about that. I don't want to get into video games. I'm not that kind of a guy, but definitely with some of these card games, it is kind of interesting to do this every once in a while. So let me know. If you like the video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and definitely ring the bell in order to make sure that you get notified of new videos that I'm coming out with. And thank you very much for watching.